Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile for you guys today. To kick start off November, I decided to go with Endymion Pendulum. Now, funny enough, this deck actually got a new support card from Age of Overlord called Exceed the Pendulum, which actually does offer a lot of good utility for this deck. And thanks to that, I was able to kind of adjust my deck accordingly, just to, basically help me facilitate the card. And honestly, I can do a little bit more with the deck now than I did before. As y'all saw in my previous video where I did a test hand on this, like, yeah, this deck can actually make some pretty scary end boards if you play your cards correctly. And yeah, it's like, since, Endymion Pendulum is a deck that not a lot are familiar with, you might be able to throw your opponent off guard with it. Again, it all depends on how well you play the cards. And keep in mind, Drone Lockward is still very much a card, so you got to learn how to play around that too. But again, once you know this deck from top to bottom, you should do just fine. But anyway, my deck is now 42 cards in the main, and that's mainly because I wanted to add like some additional like counterplay cards. And also, again, I had to like adjust my certain engines a bit just to, basically like add extra consistency, if you want to call it. But anyway, figured I'd just share with you guys what I came up with. All right, but overall, the general profile is not much different than the original one, but again, you'll see like what the changes are in just a moment. But starting off with 2 copies of Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic. This is probably one of your best boss monsters, simply because he's a spell and trap negator, and also if he has a counter on him, he cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. And also his pendulum effect states that you can remove 6 counters literally from anywhere, special summon this card, count any number of cards you control with counters on them, and pop up to the same number of cards on the field. And this is actually pretty useful because, like, let's say I already had 2 monsters that have spell counters on them. I get to pop 2 cards on either side of the field. So it's not only spot removal, but it also helps you out too. Like, if you need to get like a specific pendulum card out of your pendulum zone, you can do that too. And just, yeah, basically just kind of like reset your pendulum skills the way you need them to be. Next up, 3 copies of Servant of Endymion, probably the best card in the entire deck. Simply because if you're mostly going to use it for the pendulum effect, by the way. If this card has 3 spell counters, you can remove them, special summon this card from your pendulum zone, and special summon any one monster from your deck that can hold a spell counter. So this is great to get your Mythical Beast Jackal King, or if you already have one in hand and you can pendulum summon it out like easily, just go with the Mighty Master and you're set to go from there. Next up, 2 copies of Magister of Endymion, basically the same as Servant, but the only real difference is that he summons from the extra deck, so long as, again, the monster can hold a spell counter. And one thing about these 2 cards is like you can only special summon one of these once per turn, except Mighty Master, of course. But yeah, Servant and Magister can only be special summoned once per turn. I decided to cut Reflection of Endymion simply because like the card just wasn't doing anything, and I just wasn't really getting a whole lot of value out of it. So I did replace it for a better level 7 monster, which you'll see in a bit. But moving on. Next up, 3 copies of Magical Abductor. Definitely your second best card because similar to Servant of Endymion, you're going to use it for the pendulum effect more. This card has 3 spell counters. You can remove them and search out any pendulum monster you want. And of course, adding on spell counters is the game of this deck. So like, yeah, try to activate as many spells as possible. For the Mythical Beast engine, playing 2 copies of Master Cerberus. I like it for the pendulum effect because if you control no cards in your other pendulum zone, you can destroy this card, and if you do, add any level 7 or lower Mythical Beast effect monster from your deck to your hand. Next up, 2 copies of Mythical Beast Jackal King. This card's probably like the best of the engine simply because it's a monster negator, and it's not a hard one per turn to negate. So yeah, each time you activate a spell card, this card gains 2 spell counters. Same thing with Mythical Beast Master Cerberus, which that one actually banishes monsters, but you have to remove 4 spell counters to use that. But Jackal King's great because also you can actually use the pendulum effect if you want to, just to like get a free extender out of your extra deck. So you pop this card, special summon the Mythical Beast Master Cerberus, and yeah, you can basically just got free Link Fodder just like that. 1 Mythical Beast Garuda, spell and trap card destruction, so pretty good. And also it does act as a form of disruption too, where if this card is in your hand, you can remove 3 spell counters from your field, special summon this card, and then bounce back a special summon monster your opponent controls. So yeah, it's pretty nice. For the Pendulum Magician engine, playing 2 copies of Harmonizing. I would like to play 3, but I didn't have enough space for it, so I think 2 is just fine because it's searchable. I actually decided to replace Reflection of Endymion for Dragon Color Magician instead because it is searchable through Pendulum Call. And it actually has the same skill as Reflection, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I like the fact that it's also a level 7, so like if I need to go into like my Odd Eyes play, this is definitely one of the cards to help me do that. And yeah, I just found like this card was a little bit more handy than the Reflection of Endymion. Playing 1 Oath Dragon Magician. This is mainly here because this is going to be one of your prime targets for Harmonizing Magician. Because this plus a Harmonizing, it's a free Baron de Fleur. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that. Playing 1 copy of Performer Pal Celestial Magician. This card's pretty good. If this card is normal special summon, it gains effects based on whatever you control. So if you control a fusion, this card can attack directly. Synchro, your opponent cannot activate monster effects. Exceeds, this card's attack becomes doubled in its original. And Pendulum, you can, during the end phase, you can search out a Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. So yeah, Celestial Magician just does a lot for this deck. White Wing Magician, this just here is an additional tuner. I've actually considered cutting this and putting in Wisdom Mind Magician instead, but so far like White Wing does enough for me. In place of like, if I can push for more synchro plays, this is definitely the card to help me do that. 1 Purple Poison, just because, you know, it's probably one of the best ones in my opinion. You could play Blackfang if you want to, but again, like it really depends on preference in my opinion. 3 Chronograph, definitely one of the best extenders because like you pop this and it special summons Time Gazer Magician directly from your deck. But also like if one of your cards is destroyed, you can special summon this card from your hand. Speaking of which, gonna run 1 Time Gazer Magician and of course 1 Astrograph Sorcerer. So all really good cards. So yeah, definitely take advantage of them. And the only non-pendulum, 1 Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. Alright, so that's it for the monsters. Now moving on to spells. Alright, so for my spell lineup, playing 3 copies of Spell Power Mastery. Probably the only 3 of in my spells because, you know, yeah, it's basically your Rhoda. It also adds an additional spell counter based on however many copies you have on the field or in the grave. 2 copies of Duelist Alliance. Someone pointed this out that it can search out any Pendulum spell or trap as well. So like as long as Pendulum is in the name, yeah, you can definitely take advantage of that. So great way to search out your Pendulum Call, which comes to our next card. 2 copies of that. I decided to go and throw in 2 copies of Triple T because like in case if I do get hit with a Droll and can't press further, I can at least rip a card out of my opponent's hand and then still set up a board where I can just like stall out for time and just continue forward. And of course to go along with it, 1 Call by the Grave. And for the 1-ofs, 1 Instant Fusion because I am still on Millenniumizer Strict. I decided to just cut my spellbook cards to 1 each simply because like most of the time if I ever need to go into this engine, I can just summon out Crowley and then yeah, I can still like press forward with these cards. So like as long as I see Blue Boy or Spellbook of Secrets, I'm all set with that. And plus they are hard ones per turns, all things considered. So yeah, sometimes you don't want to break with multiple copies. And because the bad thing about Spellbook of Knowledge is that you have to send to the grave 1 spellcaster you control or 1 other spellbook card. It can't be itself, which really sucks. So like, yeah, if it could send itself, that would be great, but unfortunately it cannot. So that's why I decided to bump them down to 1 each. And finally, 1 copy of Upstart Goblin, just, you know, for additional draw power. All right, so that's it for the main deck. Now for the extra deck, playing 2 copies of Selene. I actually got the quarter century rares. I did open up 2 boxes of the 25th rarity collection set, and I actually managed to get 2 of these. So I was like, oh, nice. I also pulled the Artemis as well. So yeah, really love that. But yeah, 2 Selene, 1 Artemis. Artemis is just here because like it helps me go into Avermax or even Access Code Talker if I have to. And yeah, like you'd be surprised just how useful having an Artemis is. Next up, 1 Crowley. As I mentioned before, this helps you get into your spellbook engine if you really need to go into it. 1 Beyond the Pendulum. This card's actually pretty good because like, yeah, you pay 1,200 life points to add any Pendulum card. But the thing is like, as long as you perform a Pendulum summon after, like it could be at any time. So you could set your scale still and then perform your Pendulum summon and then all your effects are live again. But the next card is probably one of my personal favorites now, Exceed the Pendulum. So as I mentioned, this was in Age of Overlord as a super rare. Requires 2+ effect monsters, including a Pendulum monster, so relatively easy to summon. Gains 100 attack points for each Pendulum monster card you control, which is pretty nice considering that, yeah, we do set on several Pendulum monsters, so it does get pretty big. But I like the fact that it basically does effect similar to Electromite. Once per turn, if this card is Link Summon, you can add 1 face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck, and add it back to your hand. So it's a good way to recycle like certain cards like Chronograph or Harmonizing Magician, or even your Astrograph Sorcerer. So yeah, like this basically helps with that. And then a quick effect during the main phase, you can special summon one pendulum monster from your hand or your graveyard in defense mode with a level between your pendulum scales. So like, yeah, basically it kind of does an additional pseudo pendulum summon in a way, but not really. But it's a good way just to, you know, like get an additional body back on the field. Especially like if you have something that's got like a big defense stat, like for example, Master Cerberus. Well, actually you wouldn't even be able to do Master Cerberus. But if you wanted to, you can go like Mighty Master if it's already in your graveyard, or if you want to get like one of your Pendulum Magician monsters back, this is definitely a great card to do that. Moving on, one copy of Appaloosa. I mean, it's pretty generic. One Avermax, and one Axis Code Talker just for board breakers. For my Synchro lineup, playing one copy of Baron the Floor. I actually got the Prismatic Collector's Rare, which is pretty nice. One Borlode Savage. And of course, Clearwing Fast Dragon. I was playing that trained Synchro monster because, you know, it was inherent. It was basically pendulum support, but I decided to swap it out for Clearwing Fast Dragon instead, simply because this one actually doesn't negate, and I could always bring it back out through a pendulum summon if it gets destroyed. So yeah, not too bad. One Absolute Dragon, one Vortex Dragon, and finally one Millenniumizer Strict. And yeah, that pretty much rounds up that lineup. All right, so now let's move on to the side deck. For the side deck, I made several changes, starting off with 3 copies of Nib. Nib is just good for combo-heavy decks in general, so why not? 3 Dark Ruler No More. Just a really powerful going second card, because like I was going to do Droplet originally, but I kind of don't want to discard my cards, so yeah, I think Dark Ruler No More is a little bit better suited for this deck. 2 Secret Village of Spellcasters. Since we are primarily on Spellcasters, this is a really powerful floodgate against Pearly, against Rescueways, because they do play a lot of spells as well. Of course, you got to watch out for like Branded, because like Branded does play a couple Spellcasters, so, but if they're on like Branded Chimera, then your chances of like locking them out from spells is increased, but there are other Branded variants, so just bear that in mind. But yeah, any deck that relies heavily on spells and doesn't play any Spellcasters, this is definitely the card to floodgate them with. 2 Lightning Storm and a Harpy's Feather Duster. You know, just good board breakers. 1 Change of Heart. Didn't really know what else to put in here, so figured, you know what, let's just play a card that can basically force out negates, and yeah, Change of Heart was the card I came up with. And finally, 3 copies of Imperm. And yeah, that pretty much rounds out our side deck, and yeah, that's it. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.